everybody, Tom Olson here, and I am here with my beautiful, wonderful wife, Becky Olson, and this is our first day, day one of marriage tips that me and Becky are going to be giving the Good Success community for the next 7 days. Each of us, myself and my wife, are going to come up with one tip each, and we'll probably feed off of each other a little bit. Hopefully, we'll see. I'm not sure how it's going to work out. So I'm going to give a tip today, and my wife is going to give a tip today about how to have a long, loving, lasting marriage. So knowing that all marriage isn't perfect, and knowing that no marriage is actually perfect, and no people are perfect, there has to be things in marriage, and there has to be standards, right? And tips that you can get from other people that might be able to help you in different ways, but also kind of encouraging yourself and encouraging others through the mistakes that you've made and through different things that you've learned through your marriage. So the first thing that I'll say, and this is my number one tip, and if all else fails, I think this is the number one most important tip that I think you'll get from all of this, is that to put God first and to understand that have the right definition of what love is. Wouldn't you think, Becky?
Yes, absolutely. As Christians, we understand that all love comes from God. The Bible says that God is love. So without God, you can't have true love. And it's very important that as husband and wives, if each of us as individuals are striving to keep God in the forefront of our lives individually, that the marriage is only going to benefit.
Absolutely, and it's almost like as if instead of comparing ourselves or blaming each other to each other or to other marriages, I think the person that we're supposed to compare ourselves to is God, and to also know that if God is love, and the only way you can actually love your spouse is through God's love. That's the only real true love. So if you don't have God's love in you, if the love of the Father is not in you, how can you love other people? And then also knowing the real definition of love. Well, one of the definitions of love is God. God is love. But the other definition of love, and the one that we love at Good Success, and it's really one of our core values, is charity. So and the definition of charity is something that you wouldn't think. I think a lot of people think of charity as in like giving to charity, which I think that's part of love. But I think charity is so much more than giving. It's a way of living. And part of those ways of living is not doing things. So it's not puffed up. It says charity suffereth long. It says charity is kind. Charity doesn't look to benefit itself. It's looking to be that conduit and love other people. And if you read Corinthians 13, you can kind of go through the love chapter and go through all those things. Is not puffed up, does not
suffereth long.
Suffereth long, and all those things have to do with patience, and all those things have to do with not necessarily always getting your way and forgiving. I mean, think about that, suffering long.
Right, and if we compare, we're supposed to take God's love and use that as our standard to the love that we should have for one another, because let's face it, we're humans. We can't just...
I mean, at least Becky's human.
Well, Tom's superhuman. But anyways, we're humans. And
check mark for me.
There's no... I'm talking. There's no way that we can muster up enough self-will or self-discipline to give each other the love that we could get from God. I love when Tom says, be a conduit, not a bucket. And that's really true with love for one another. You are supposed to go to the source of love, which is God, and get that love and then pass it on to your spouse and your children and those in your life.
Yeah, so that's my number one tip, is understand what real love is, understand where it comes from, and that you're just supposed to be a conduit of His love. And the standard for love is what God has set for us, not what we set for ourselves. So that was my tip for the day. Becky, what is your tip?
Well, my tip is not as deep as that one. It's going on dates with your spouse. One thing that my parents were married for 43 years before my mom passed away, and they had a rule that every week, and they had 6 children, every week they would go on a date. And typically that date was just going out to a restaurant, eating food, or my dad would take my mom somewhere shopping, and then they would come, they would come home. But they had one-on-one time set apart for one another. They made each other a priority. And that really does help benefit a marriage.
Absolutely. So we've been married for 22 years, and even before this, we have been practicing this. Even if we're on vacation, even if we're on vacation with our kids, we go out and our kids know mom and dad is a priority to each other. But not only that, what I've heard my wife say over the years is, I really appreciate that time that I know that you've set aside for me. So it's not just for you, it's for your spouse. Another discipline that we've tried to put in our marriage as well that goes along with that is trying to go to at least one marriage seminar or one thing a year that works on the marriage. And for me, it's not necessarily because I think we always need it, but it's a discipline that shows that where my priorities are. And
it's education that you're putting in your toolbox of knowledge. Every marriage goes through difficulties and struggles, and if you don't have that time that you've invested and worked on your marriage in the storehouse to say, when those difficulties do come, where do you draw from? What do? You have no idea. And where better to learn how to benefit your marriage than from people who have been married 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years. These are not things that we have come up with on our own. These are things that we have learned and gleaned from other successful marriages.
So whether or not you need it in the moment, what she's saying is you may need it in the future, and it's going to be a part of you, that knowledge that you kind of sit back in your subconscious may help you. So that's going to do it for today. Again, the number one tip is to put God first, know what real love is, know that it all comes from God, and we're supposed to be His conduit, and He's the standard. Number two is go on dates with your spouse. Make it a commitment to each other and make a commitment to yourself. I hope this helps you today. We will see you back here tomorrow for day number 2 of our tips for a long, loving, lasting marriage. Have a good success day.